So you may want to write some of this stuff down. I will put this again on the website so that you can watch it, or you can look at the PowerPoint presentation later if you want to. But you can also writing it down right now is always a good way. Writing things down is the best way to ingrain it in your memory. So you make sure that you do not forget something. Writing it down is the best way to do that. Plus, not everything that I'm going to tell you is going to be included in the slides. I just have some main kind of ideas to look at and a quick example. Outlining is an extremely important part of writing an essay. You want to outline because then it makes writing your essay easier. It's sort of like one of my favorite activities, as most of you know, is is building Legos. I highly enjoy it. I highly enjoy building stuff with my kids, and I like building stuff on my own. It's something I've enjoyed since I was about 5. Everything that you guys are doing right now, all the note-taking that you're doing, is sort of like gathering the pieces. You are finding the pieces that you need to build something. You are finding the pieces, gathering them together, putting them in one spot. The next thing you need to do, the outlining process, is sort of like what comes with like every single package of Legos that you ever get. Right. Instructions. It's the plan. It's the design of how your thing is actually going to go together. Whatever set it is, whether it's a train or a spaceship or something, a castle, something cool like that. Whatever it is, there's always a plan. There's always a set of instructions. Actually, the most frustrating part of my kids' Legos, the Duplos, is most Duplos don't come with instructions because there's no set plan. It's just like, here's a whole bunch of blocks, build something. I'm like, what am I supposed to build? I don't know what I'm supposed to build. Your outline is your plan. Your outline is your plan. It's your things that you need to make sure that everything goes together the right way, so that you have all the pieces that you need. Okay? So how do you outline? The first thing you need to do is you need to organize your notes. One of the things that Lego just started doing recently that I really, in a way, appreciate is they've started putting everything into numbered bags. So you know when you're working on a certain set of the directions, you're only going to use parts from bag number 1. So you don't have to open up everything and dig through everything. It helps you stay organized. You need to do the same thing with your notes. So what I highly recommend you do is go through your notes. Go through your notes. Take all of the notes that you have created while reading through your research material and place them into a folder under the heading of early life, achievements, or later life. You can, I believe you can actually create folders. I think you can. If you can't, I can. You can create folders in your, you should be able to create folders inside of that document setting that we were looking at. When you guys go into the student files, you go under my name, and then you go all the way through, and then you find your name. You've got all of your notes stored in there. We'll have to test it out, but if you can create folders in there, create a folder in there, entitle it Early Life. Put all of your notes from Early Life into that folder. So when you go to organize your thoughts on Early Life, they're all there. Okay? Once you've done that and you've got them all in place, look through them all. You've got a lot of different notes about a lot of different things about someone's early life. Okay? The next thing you want to do is you want to look through your notes and decide, what do you want to say about that person's early life? What's something that you want to say? What is your opinion? What's a statement that you can make about their early life? A lot of this you're going to find in the areas where I asked you in your notes to tell me what you think. Okay? Those areas where I said, tell me what you think. You're going to look at that, you're going to kind of come up with an idea of what is it that you want to say about this person's early life. Write that down somewhere. Create a note for it. Or, as you're going through the outlines, put it into the outline. What is it that you want to say about that person's early life? Okay? One statement, a short statement, one sentence. Condense it. What's one thing that you could say about that person's early life? Yeah, where it says, what do you say? What do you want to say about blank's early life? Whoever your person is, whether it's John Lennon or J.K. Rowling or anybody else that we have, other Leonardo da Vinci. Anyway, what do you want to say about their early life? Okay. Maybe their early life is kind of a mystery. You didn't find a whole ton of information out there. Maybe that's what you want to say. That there's, that a lot of their early life is a mystery. But here are the things that we do know. The next thing that you want to do is you want to decide which notes or pieces of evidence that you have support that. What pieces of evidence back up your opinion, the statement that you're making about their early life? You might find a lot of information about someone's early life. And I've asked you to cover and take notes on at least 3 different aspects of their early life. But your statement, all of the notes that you've taken may not necessarily line right up with that. So, decide which notes or pieces of evidence or pieces of research back up that point. What backs it up? What agrees with or confirms your point? Yes? Right, but almost every biography gives some sort of author's opinion about the person's life. I mean, you've read some stuff. It's mostly just, a lot of it is strict information. But I want you to kind of give me your thoughts on it. I want you to tell me what you think. That's why we included that last section. So what do you think about this person's life? I want to know your opinion. And I want you to have facts to back up that opinion. Okay? That's why we've taken all these extensive notes. The last way is decide on a way of distinguishing these notes from the others. Maybe one of the things that you can do in Word is you can actually go through, and I can show you in a few minutes if we need to. You can open up something and you can actually highlight things. So you can click on a little highlight button and you just run your cursor over and highlight certain things. So maybe you have a note on their early life family. And there's 1 or 2 things in that that you've pulled out of your research that shows that your particular person maybe didn't have the easiest childhood. Maybe they lost some relatives, some loved ones, but they didn't have an easy childhood. Remember our example of Bonaparte, or Napoleon Bonaparte, when we were looking at that. And just in that very short section, we found out that his mother had died and an older brother had died as well. Then they were moving away, leaving home when he was rather young. We could use those examples to say that he had a kind of rough childhood. Maybe that's the point we want to make, that he had a rough childhood. And so in here we can say, look through your notes, decide what you want to say about Napoleon Bonaparte. His early life was not easy. It was very difficult. So now we want to look for notes or pieces of research that back that up. Right away in that book we saw right away. At 9 years old, he had lost a brother, his mother, and was moving to a different place with his father and his uncle. That's research that backs up our opinion that his childhood was not very good. Not very easy. It was a rough childhood. Yes, Joe? You need to have, that was the next part I was getting to. It says on here, remember that you need to use at least 3 sources. Oh, that should say in your essay. So make sure your notes come from different sources. One of the things I was telling Courtney is she was saying that she was having trouble finding all the sources that she was finding all had the exact same information in them. That's fine. Still take notes from those sources that you're finding, because then you can say that this person and this person both agree on this thing. You found the information about this event in 2 sources. That's A, telling me that you've done multiple research. You've done lots of research. And it tells me that those research sources agree. You should, throughout the course of your paper, whether it doesn't have to be in early life, you don't have to quote 3 sources. In later life, you don't have to quote 3 sources. But throughout the course of the paper, through the entire paper, there need to be 3 sources cited. You need to refer back to 3 sources. You cannot use just one and then write a work cited that has 3 sources. Okay? Because you didn't cite. A work cited literally means, here is the work that I've used and quoted in my paper. If you only have 1 source used in your entire paper and put 3 sources in your work cited, that's wrong. You have to use 3 sources in your paper in order to have 3 sources in your work cited. Okay? So throughout the course of your paper, whether it's you use 2 here and 1 there, and then 2 later, or however you do it, you have to use 3 throughout the whole of your paper. Yes? It could be 3 websites. It could be, I would prefer it be a book and 2 websites. We spent so much time with the books, and the books are really good resources. Probably the best sources, legitimate sources you're going to be able to find. I would prefer you use the book and 2 other sources. That's what I'm going to tell you to use, the book and 2 other sources. 2 books and 1 source is fine. 3 books is fine. That's great. But a book and 2 other sources for sure. If you have enough books to not use a website, you don't have to use a website. Then you should use the websites. Yes, bro. You can have more than 3 sources. You just have to have at minimum 3 sources. At least 3 sources. If you have more, as long as you're citing them in your paper, you can have more. Okay? Alright. So this is what you've done for early life. So what do you guys think you should do for achievements? Continue on all 3 parts. Okay? You're going to do the same thing. All 3 parts. You're going to go look at the next section. You want to look at achievements. And you want to say, what can you say about their achievements? What can I say about this person's achievements? What is a statement I can make? And then you want to look through your notes. Once again, find the notes that back up your opinion, the statement that you're making, the pieces of research. Okay? Finally, decide on a way of distinguishing these notes from the others once again. Maybe it's you're highlighting the things in the notes so that you know what to do. Okay? Next, you need to put your thoughts and research in order. Okay? You're going to use an outline, and I'm going to kind of go over what the outline is going to look like in a minute. But you're going to put your thoughts and research in order. For each of the main paragraphs of your research, make a statement. That's what we just talked about. That was the question that we were answering. You're going to make a statement. Then you need to go over your notes and decide which notes best relate to your statement. And then these notes will become the backbone of your paper. You need those research notes, those pieces of research. Now when I show you the outline, there's going to be 1 segment for quote and research. But you can use multiple pieces of quotes and research in this little highlighted section. Okay? So just because there's 1 space doesn't mean when you're making your outline you only have to put 1 thing in there. I didn't make you do all this research just to only use 3 little short bits of research in your actual paper. You're going to want to use more than just 1 per section. But I wrote the outline this way to show you where it goes. Okay, so you know exactly where it goes. Okay? So let's take a look at the outline itself. Very beginning. The very beginning of the outline. Now, there is the version that you guys are going to fill out. I'm glad you guys find this important. The outline that you guys are going to fill out, that's in the student files, looks very similar to this. You start out with the big bolded headings up here on the top section. These here, these are just sort of placeholders. They tell you what paragraph you're in. So you don't have to write anything next to introduction. It's just a placeholder. It just tells you, okay, you're in the introductory paragraph. Okay, you're in the early life paragraph. Now you're in the achievements paragraph. Now you're in the later life paragraph. And now you're in the concluding paragraph. Okay? They're just sort of placeholders. When you actually fill these out, you're not going to write anything next to those. You're not going to fill anything in here. The first thing you need is some sort of attention getter. We've all talked about this a number of times. When we were filling out our sheets, where did we say a good place to get attention getters would be from? Interesting facts, fun facts, those type of things. Good place to get an attention getter. Lets everybody know what you're talking about. Provides some sort of interesting inlet. The next thing is you have a statement of your overall topic or opinion. So this is where you're going to take the three things that we've kind of talked about. How did the early life, our question about early life, our question about achievements, and our question about the later life. And you want to come up with an overall statement. What's something that you can say about this person's life? What is something you can say about this person's life as a whole? One statement. What's something you can say in one sentence about this person's life? Okay? So that's the first thing. You're going to come up with your statement, your overall topic and opinion. Now you're going to move into your first body paragraph. So you've moved into your second paragraph, your first body paragraph. This is where you're going to talk about the early life. Obviously, you're going to start out with a transition. Sometimes I find it easier to fill in the whole rest of the paragraph before you come back and do the transitions. Sometimes it's easier to transition when you know exactly what you're talking about. You know what you're transitioning to. You're going to copy down right back that first statement about why your overall thing is true. What's the first thing that you can say about their early life? It's the first thing that you can say about their early life. What do you want to say about their early life? That's what should go there. Next, you're going to provide, it says an example, but it could be multiple. It should be multiple examples. Multiple examples or quotes from your research notes. Okay? And then finally, you're going to explain how those quotes from your research notes help back up or demonstrate your point that you made at the very beginning. So you're going to use these. Let's see if this works. You're going to use these to back up this. And you're going to use this to explain those. Okay? So they kind of go in a layered effect. Here you're going to have a statement. That one statement is going to be like one line. It's your main thing. Your main thought on this person's early life. Then you need to provide some examples of that. So if you said that Napoleon Bonaparte, if your statement about his early life was that Napoleon Bonaparte had a very rough childhood, that could be your statement. Your examples might be the quote that we pulled out of the front of that book. And then maybe you found another part about how his mother died in another book about him, or an online journal about him. And you can use those two things together to talk about how he had a rough childhood. And then finally in that paragraph you need to explain to me how those things meant that he had a rough childhood. What is it about your mother and brother dying and moving by the age of 9 that makes your childhood rough? Why is that rough? Yeah, you're young, you don't understand, most children have parents, but still have parents. So those are the things that you want to include in there. What are the things that make this rough? That made it a rough childhood? Why is that? Explain how you use that information to come up with that final thought, that this is rough. Same thing for achievements. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to have a transition. And then you're going to have your second statement about going back to your first one. So now you're saying a statement about their achievements. What's one thing that you could say about their achievements? So you could talk about, if we were continuing to talk about Napoleon, we could say that by and large, he was one of the greatest generals to ever run an army. Though his avarice got the best of him. His greed. I would say his avarice was much better word. His avarice got the better of it. He wanted too much. He wanted to win too much. So we could say that. That could be our statement. That he had, that he was one of the greatest generals of all time, but his avarice and his greed got the better of him in the end. That could be our second statement. Our examples to point this out, we talk about his failed expeditions into Russia and how or we talk about his conquests, the things that he did right. So we could quote and research, or cite our research about the different places that he conquered, spreading from France into Prussia, Spain, Italy, into Russia. It's no longer Egypt, parts of Greece, all of his conquests that went well. And then we can start talking about to show that yes, he was a good general. But then we need to also give examples of his failures. His failed attempts to overtake Russia, the complete wasting of his army in the wintry north, and finally his defeat at Waterloo to the British, thus ending his reign as emperor and general. We can cite all that information. And then we need to come in, after we've used all that research, explain how those things that show that he was one of the greatest generals. Maybe we can compare him to other generals and talk about the places that he conquered, as opposed to the other people. And how hard his failures were and what happened to him after he failed. So we explain those things that he did. Now we move on to later life. Once again, you kind of transition in. You're going to have another statement about his later life. If we were still talking about Napoleon, maybe our statement about his later life was that he led a sad and lonely existence as he sat alone on the island of Corsica. So that's our statement. He ended up leading a sad and lonely life, wasting away on the island of Corsica. That could be our statement. Now we need examples or quotes to back it up. So we can go back to our research. Maybe we found some of his journal writings, which there are a lot of, where he talks about how lonely and sad he is. Maybe we can talk about first of all, his banishment. The reason why he was sent to Corsica. He was exiled out of France and into Corsica, where he sat alone and lived out the rest of his life. So maybe that's what we can talk about while we move as our examples. And we can use his journal entries. Then we need to explain why he was banished. Why was it a sad and lonely existence? Why did he get stuck in Corsica? And why didn't anybody come to rescue him? He was stuck there. He had a huge following in the military. Why didn't anybody ever come and rescue him? Take him off the island. Bring him back home. Why didn't that ever happen? Why was he left alone? Finally, we need to come back to our conclusion. And our conclusion is sort of like the introduction in reverse. We restate our overall topic. So let's say we look at our three statements about Napoleon. Our three things that we've said about our first thing about his early life, that he had a very rough childhood. Secondly, that he was one of the greatest generals of all time, but his avarice, his greed, led to his downfall. And lastly, that he led a sad and lonely life, finished off a sad and lonely life, abandoned on the island of Corsica. Those are our three statements. We want to make a statement about an overall statement based on those three. So what's something we could say about Napoleon based on those three statements? He had a sad childhood. He had a rough childhood. He was one of the greatest generals of all time, except his avarice got the best of him. His greed got the best of him. And finally he ended up leading a sad and lonely life on the island of Corsica. Brooke, what do you think? Okay? That he was a great military leader, but he was very greedy. What else can we say about great? Okay? Okay, he had a very dark life, but was still able to lead people to great victory. What else could we say about him? Based solely on those three statements. What else could we say about him? Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, he had great battles that he won.
That kind of focuses just on his achievements. We want to make sure that we're including all three of those things together when we talk about it. When you guys do this, that's what you're going to want to come up with. For this top thing in here, the statement of your overall topic or opinion, you're going to look at all three of these statements about your areas of life and come up with one thing that you can say based on those three things, those three opinions. It's one thing that you can say. So we'd restate it. Whatever it was that we said up here, we'd say again down here. And then finally, we'd leave with some concluding thoughts. Maybe we have a really great quote from Napoleon, something that he's documented as having said, that we think is inspirational or encouraging, or demonstrates how sad his life was. Napoleon, although one of the greatest generals of all time, led a really sad and lonely life. Maybe that's our statement that we can put up on the top. That although he was one of the most successful generals of all time, he was a very sad and lonely individual. Maybe that's the statement that we make. It includes all the things that we've talked about in his life together. And then maybe we can have some concluding thoughts that we can add into that. Okay? Yes, bro. He was short. Not necessarily ugly, but he was short. Well documented for being short. In fact, there is actually, in psychology, there's what's called the Napoleon syndrome. It's or I don't necessarily know if it's still recognized, but it's when short people feel the need to act big and tough in order to prove that they're just as strong as a tall person, in order to make up for their height disadvantage. It's called Napoleon syndrome. You see it a lot in small dogs. Anybody ever seen a small dog that thinks that it's a big dog? Yeah. I have a 10-pound Chihuahua wiener dog mix who likes to try and attack the 75-pound lab that lives next door. So he definitely suffers from Napoleon syndrome. But you see this a lot. Like that is a thing. Okay. Does this outline sort of make sense? Okay. When you guys are putting it together, the form that I've given you online that's in your folders, all you really have to do, all I'm wanting you to do, is when you go in, for your transition line, highlight it, type in whatever transition you're using. Just type over top of it, okay? For your second point, for your first statement about why this is true, type your statement right over top of it. Now you can, if you want, you can put like little colons afterwards and type it in so that you know what's going next. But it works better if you just sort of highlight it and cut it out and put the new stuff in. Okay? Does that make sense as to what I want? Alright. And also I want to make sure, this here says an example / quote from your research notes. This should be more than just one. Not just one example. There should be multiple to back up this point. That's why you've done all this research. So that you can have multiple points to back up that statement. Not just one point. Okay? Any questions over the outlining process at all? Alright. I am going to ask that you turn in an outline. in lieu of a rough draft. We're not going to be doing traditional rough drafts. I am going to ask for an outline. Currently, I am thinking outlines by Friday. If all notes are done by Wednesday, taking those notes and turning them into outlines between Wednesday and Friday, I don't think should be difficult. So Friday, outlines will be due, which gives us all of next week to take the outlines and turn them into final papers. I think that's more than enough time. What do you guys think? Pretty good? Okay. All right. Any questions over deadlines or anything like that? Okay. On Wednesday, at the end of the day, Wednesday, I'm going to go through the folders and I'm going to check your notes. Okay? As I've said before, you should have a minimum of 9 notes. Okay? You should have at least 9 notes. Okay? That means that you're going to have 1 note for each of these 3 headings: early life, achievements, later life, from each of your 3 sources. Some of you broke it down even further because that's what I originally asked you to do, and if you did, that's great. You're going to have way more than 9 notes. But I'm going to be looking for 2 things. 1, that you have at least 9 notes. 2, that you have them from at least 3 sources. Okay? So you need at least 3 sources worth of notes. You need to have 9 notes. At least. If you have more, great. The other thing, for those of you who are struggling, like I told Courtney earlier, let's say you're working on achievements, and every single piece of information that you have has the exact same information about achievements. That's fine. Create a new note for the next thing that you have that says both of these things agree. Both of these things have the same information. Copy the information from both. Maybe it's worded a little bit differently. Maybe you can use a different set of wording and a different quote. But that way you can state these 2 or these 3 sources all agree that this happened. Okay? Yes, sir. That one thing. Yeah, it's just that one thing. That's the only one thing that you find for that note. That's fine. Some of your sources, especially like your books, are going to have tons of stuff in it because that's the first thing that you use. Some of your later stuff isn't going to have as much information. I understand. Okay? So at least 9 notes, at least 3 different sources, all due on Wednesday. Okay? How many of you guys are still working on your notes? Still getting notes together? Okay, how many of you guys are ready to start outlining tomorrow? Anybody ready to start outlining tomorrow? All right, awesome. So I should expect to see everybody working on research and notes tomorrow.
You can bring in music.
You can bring in music if you want to bring in your iPods or your phones and headphones. You can bring them, plug them in. If you don't have that and you want to just plug it into the computer and listen to music on the computer, that's fine too. Whatever's going to keep you focused on working, that's the thing. 2 things with this. A, I shouldn't hear your music, and B, it should be keeping you focused on working. If you have your headphones in but you're not focused on working, then you're going to lose them for the whole rest of the time we're working on the project. Okay? I'm talking to you, Jayla. Just kidding. All right. Huh? What poster?
Sparta.
What about Sparta? Oh, I look like Sparta?
Yeah.
Cool, I like that.
I remember when you were like.
Did you guys see Mr. Anderson?
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Anderson was awesome.
Did he have the logo on the side?
No, we all, like, because I was supposed to get the Spider-Man logo, and we tried to do it, and it looked terrible. So we just ended up shaving the whole sides off. Yeah. No, I don't have the money to go pay for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. No.
Oh no, you should just dye your like mustache.
Ah, shut the door.
Dye it blind.